Welcome back to Harville. And just this past week alone, if you listened to Newt Gingrich, you heard the name of one man repeated again and again, Saul Alinsky.
The debate we're going to have with President Obama over the next 8 or 9 months, the outlining of the two Americas, the America of the Declaration of Independence, the America of Saul Alinsky, to clearly take Barack Obama on at every level, take him on values, where he is a Saul Alinsky radical. But the centerpiece of this campaign, I believe, is American exceptionalism versus the radicalism of Saul Alinsky. He draws his from Saul Alinsky, radical left-wingers, and people who don't like the classical America. He represents a big government, Saul Alinsky, radical vision of an American future, the values that he believes in, the Saul Alinsky radicalism. If you're for European socialism and Saul Alinsky radicalism, you're with Barack Obama.
Well, Saul Alinsky was a community organizer who helped the poor and disenfranchised organize so that they could better their lives. And he laid out this process in his most famous book, Rules for Radicals, a pragmatic primer for realistic radicals. That was the book's full title. The book was published in 1971, and Alinsky died in 1972. So why is he in the political bloodstream right now? Melinda Henneberger is a political reporter for the Washington Post and anchors the blog She the People. Lynn Sweet covers politics for the Chicago Sun-Times. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on. I've been wanting to get this straight. William F. Buckley, godfather of the conservative movement, said Alinsky is very close to being an organizational genius. Freedom Work leader, the Tea Party group run by Dick Armey, gives Alinsky's book to its top leadership members to study. A spokesman for Freedom Work said this: his tactics when it comes to grassroots organizing are incredibly effective. And this photo, by the way, shows George Romney, Mitt's father, meeting with Alinsky in September '67, 2 months after the Detroit riots. And in it, George Romney, in the biography, he says in Romney's way, the elder Romney is quoted as saying to his white allies, "I think you ought to listen to Alinsky." Well, this is so fascinating, Melinda. I always thought of Alinsky as not a left-wing, zealous ideologue, certainly no Trotsky, no real lefty. No. And yet just sort of a guy that people like, Nick von Hoppen worked for, my friend, help poor people organize so they could have a voice, just like the Tea Party does on the right.
Well, I think he was a leftist. He was influenced by the father of Italian communism, Antonio Gramsci. But his goals and everything he laid out in this book, Rules for Radicals, really were to take the power away from the haves and give it to the have-nots. I think the reason you hear those conservatives who have obviously studied this work very closely praising it is that it's so effective. What he says in these 13 rules that he lays out, he says ridicule is man's most potent weapon. Well, you don't hear Barack Obama using ridicule. You do, though, hear Newt Gingrich using ridicule to pretty good effect. Another one of his rules is a good strategy is a strategy your people enjoy, which, Alinsky loved to have these big, outrageous demonstrations and tactics. Like, one of his favorites was when he had people come and dump garbage on the property of someone who had not been an official in Chicago who had not been responsive to garbage pickup. Is that Barack Obama? No. He does things like urge people to call their member of Congress. Again, when he says, I think Alinsky's biggest rule, number 13, is to freeze it, polarize it, convince people that all the devils are on one side, all the angels are on the other. That's the exact opposite of Barack Obama.
Right. Barack Obama does not live in a Manichaean world where all the other guys on the other side are bad guys and all the people on his side are angels. Lynn Sweet, you cover Chicago politics. Again, I think Melinda nailed it. The people who use Alinsky's really tough tactics of organization and politics are the right, who make everybody on the left or center left evil, not just different in terms of their judgments.
Absolutely. I think Newt, who says he's a historian, needs to do some more research here. Saul Alinsky never wanted to overthrow the system. He wanted to change it so that everybody had a fair shake. He didn't want to destroy the table. He wanted everybody to have a seat on it, Chris. And that's what he did in his earliest days from organizing in Chicago.
I think he uses the word Alinsky not because it sounds a Jewish name. It sounds like a Jewish name, and it is. I think he used it to sort of suggest Trotsky. I think he wants it to sound like a name. All right, you never really heard this guy, but he sounds like Trotsky. He sounds like some
But here's
commie.
another thing.
I don't think 90% or 99% of the people who hear him say Saul Alinsky have any knowledge of the guy, but it sounds like trouble
I asked
politically.
some people.
Yeah.
I was just in South Carolina, Chris, and I did ask people because he had been using this, and I talked to people. I was in his election night hotel, and he used, you did the bite from that. I said, do you know who Saul Alinsky is? People don't. I want to add one more thing. Saul Alinsky could also sound, I think organizing sounds like union. Conservatives, these conservative candidates, Newt Gingrich, are not union friendly. That's another reason. But I just want to point out that Newt is more like Alinsky right now than anyone else. Anti-establishment, populist. Newt Alinsky got his start in Chicago.
Lynn, here's your point made beautifully by Newt himself. He's trained his anger on what he calls the elites of Washington and New York, a tactic Alinsky would approve of, but, making the other side the all-powerful evils. Let's listen.
There's so many people who are so concerned about jobs, about medical costs, about the everyday parts of life, and who feel that the elites in Washington and New York have no understanding, no care, no concern, no reliability, and in fact do not represent them at all.
Melinda, you write about it, how Alinsky's tactic was to rub raw the anger and the resentments of people disenfranchised. It sounds like Newt knows how to do it.
Exactly. And in the beginning, you think, what could be more elite than bringing up, as you say, the name of this obscure guy, Saul Alinsky, that somebody heard in a seminar. Although it's not new for a lot of conservatives to hear about Saul Alinsky, because people like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity have been talking about Saul Alinsky for a while. So people who are really into movement conservatism actually have heard this before.